The epic chase, Jason versus Luke. The moon hung high and full over the cursed grounds of Camp Crystal Lake, its pale light casting long, eerie shadows through the dense forest. The air was thick with tension, every rustle down Luke's spine. He had been running for what felt like hours, his breaths coming in ragged gasps as he tried to stay ahead of the relentless hunter behind him. Jason Voorhees, the silent and unstoppable force of nature, was close. Too close. Luke could hear the heavy, methodical footsteps, and the occasional scrape of Jason's machete against the trees. Every time Luke thought he had lost him, Jason would appear, emerging from the darkness like a vengeful ghost. Luke darted between the trees, his mind racing. He had faced many challenges in the multiverse, but nothing like this. Jason was a nightmare, a predator that never tired, never stopped. There was no reasoning with him, no pleading. All Luke could do was keep running and hope for a miracle. Suddenly, Luke stumbled into a clearing. His eyes scanned the area frantically for any place to hide. He spotted an old, abandoned cabin and sprinted towards it, his heart pounding. He burst through the door and slammed it shut behind him, pressing his back against the wooden surface as he tried to catch his breath. The silence was deafening. Luke strained to hear any sign of Jason. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps approaching the cabin. Luke's pulse quickened. He had to move. He had to. A flash of light filled the cabin, and suddenly, Coins was standing before him. Her presence was both comforting and commanding, her eyes filled with a wisdom that transcended time. "Luke," she said, her voice calm yet urgent. "You have proven your worth. Take this." She handed him an old, weathered TG gun, its surface covered in strange symbols and glowing faintly. "Use it wisely." Before Luke could respond, Coin vanished as quickly as she had appeared. The cabin door shattered, and Jason loomed in the doorway, his eyes burning with an unholy fire. Luke raised the TG gun, his hands trembling. "Please work," he whispered to himself and pulled the trigger. She shot out, striking Jason square in the chest. For a moment, Jason stood still as if frozen in time. Then, his body began to morph and twist. The transformation was rapid and startling. Jason's hulking form shrank, his brutal features softened, and his machete clattered to the ground. In a matter of seconds, Jason Voorhees was no more. In his place stood a bust of female camp counselor, clad in a tight, revealing uniform, her face a mixture of confusion and rage. Luke stared in disbelief, the TG gun still smoking in his hands. He couldn't believe it had worked. The now female Jason looked around, bewildered, then fixed her eyes on Luke with a fierce glare. But something in her gaze had changed. She seemed less monstrous, more human. Before either of them could react further, a new presence filled the clearing. The air grew colder, and an ominous figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Jason X, the futuristic, cybernetic version of Jason Voorhees. His eyes glowed red with malice as he approached the female Jason, his movements mechanical and deliberate. Luke knew this was his chance. While Jason X's attention was focused on the newly transformed counselor, he slipped out of the cabin and disappeared into the forest. He had survived the chase, and now he had to move on to the next round of the ultimate Koimania Royal. As he ran, he glanced back one last time. The female Jason stood there, facing her new pursuer. Her expression was a mix of fear and determination. For a brief moment, Luke felt a pang of sympathy. But he couldn't dwell on it. He had a tournament to win and a mission to fulfill. The forest closed around him, and Luke pressed on, ready for whatever the next challenge would bring. The night was far from over, but he had taken a significant step forward. The ultimate Koimania Royal was a test of endurance, wit, and willpower, and Luke was determined to emerge victorious.